He was old, homeless, a forgotten war hero trying to stay invisible in a world that had already erased him. 3 bullies humiliated him in front of everyone. No one moved. Until Jason Statham stood up, and in total silence, showed them what real strength looks like. And in less than a minute, the entire gym would never be the same. The gym floor gleamed like glass under the white lights of the spotlights. Impeccable mats. Dumbbells aligned with surgical precision. The rhythmic sound of weights hitting the machines created a peculiar, almost hypnotic music, interspersed with whispers from trainers and sighs of exertion. It was a modern sanctuary. Body and vanity fused in harmony. The space was dominated by selective silences and whispered conversations. Everyone knew their place. The older regulars marked territory without needing words, just a look, a folded towel on the bench, or a bottle intentionally placed. Newcomers learned quickly, or left. That late afternoon, as the sun spilled orange through the gym's large front windows, something broke the symmetry. A man entered. The automatic doors opened with a soft hiss. And there he was, standing still, motionless, as if the modern world had swallowed him by surprise. His bare feet touched the floor carefully, like someone stepping on sacred ground. His clothes, worn with old stains. His beard, long and gray, hung down his chest like an abandoned cloak. His eyes, downcast, but alert, like someone who had seen too much. A homeless veteran had just walked into that temple of the body. Some people paused for a second. A guy on the treadmill slowed his pace. A woman on the leg press stopped mid-rep. The background music kept playing, but everything around him seemed to slow down. The presence of the stranger was like a dissonant noise in a perfectly tuned orchestra. The man walked with short steps. He didn't ask for help, didn't look around. He carried only a crumpled bottle, the kind you find in street trash bins. The gym floor seemed to reject him with every step. It was as if his presence pushed the air, creating a void between him and the others. The receptionist looked but didn't act. A security guard further back made a motion to stand, but something in the old man's stride made him retreat. Maybe it was the way he kept his chin up, or how his shoulders, though curved with age, didn't show submission. He seemed at peace, a strange kind of authority that isn't learned in a gym but in trenches and real storms. He went to a forgotten corner of the gym, where the mats and stretching ropes were kept, the least noble area. No state-of-the-art machines, no mirrors, just floor and silence. With dignified slowness, he knelt down, cracked his fingers gently, lay down on the mat and began a series of crunches, each repetition done with firm breathing, eyes fixed on the ceiling. There was no rush, no vanity, only discipline. Around him, glances began to gather. Some laughed quietly, others whispered. A pair of fit influencers lost focus on their video. His presence was uncomfortable. It broke the place's glamour. But he didn't seem to notice. From the back, where the heaviest weights were contested by professional athletes and local bodybuilders, someone was watching. A man sitting silently. Plain black t-shirt, gray workout pants, worn sneakers, broad shoulders, aligned posture. Jason Statham. Most hadn't noticed him yet. He was discreet. He was there like anyone else, adjusting the plates on the bench press, drying his face with a regular towel. But his eyes never strayed from what was happening on the other side of the room. Jason had seen that before, not in that gym, but in the world. Those looks, that restrained laughter, that collective posture of judgment. It was always the same. The only difference was the setting. The old man finished the crunches, sat up, took a deep breath, stretched his arms. A group of 3 muscular young men, who until then had been loudly discussing their personal squat records, noticed the movement. The tallest of them discreetly pointed at the veteran, laughed, said something in a friend's ear. The second made a face of disgust. The third scoffed loudly, just to be heard. Jason didn't move, but his jaw tightened slightly, as if something internal had locked into place. The veteran stood, wiped the mat with a piece of t-shirt he had tied around his waist. picked up his crumpled bottle and walked over to a low-row machine. It was vacant. He sat there, adjusted the weight to the minimum, and began. The three young men slowly walked toward him, but they hadn't approached yet. It wasn't the right moment, and they wanted the right audience. They waited for more glances, more attention. Jason watched, calmly, but his hand had stopped mid-movement. His breath was caught in his chest like someone waiting for the inevitable. And on the other side of the room, the inevitable was approaching. The veteran was completing his second set when his water bottle was kicked aside by one of the guys. It slid across the floor and gently hit the wall. The old man looked. Slowly. Didn't react. Just breathed deeply. And continued. But that was enough. Laughter started to flicker like tiny embers. A woman in the cardio area looked around. She wanted to see if someone would do something. A trainer crossed his arms, tense. A guy took out his earbuds. The tension had set in, but no one moved. It was as if the entire environment was testing its own moral boundaries. The old man stood, walked over to his bottle, slowly bent down and picked it up. In the process, his knee cracked. He winced slightly, but didn't complain. Walked back to the machine. Jason followed every step. His eyes didn't blink. The trio moved closer. The tallest snapped his fingers. The second threw a sweaty towel onto the floor near the old man. The third made exaggerated gestures of disgust. They wanted a spectacle, a target, something to post later. But what they didn't know was that Jason hadn't just noticed all of this. He had already decided what he would do. The old man once again didn't react, just continued, sweat pouring, steady breathing, an invisible warrior resisting where no one wanted him. The tallest came even closer. He dragged the training bench with his foot, scraping it harshly. The old man nearly lost his balance. The room froze. That was the moment the line was crossed. And that was when Jason Statham left the bench where he had been sitting. Not in a rush. Not with fanfare. Just with a precision. Terrifying. The towel was folded in a clean motion. The gaze focused. Each step calculated. There was no need to rush. Because he knew exactly what needed to be done. And the moment Jason took the first step, a woman on the treadmill looked up. Her eyes widened. A man on the bench press choked on his water. A trainer dropped his clipboard. The room stopped. But what no one knew was that in the back of the gym, Jason Statham had already been watching. And something in his gaze indicated that he would not let this go unnoticed. The old man's breathing was heavy but steady. His tired body still moved with discipline as if it were commanded by an ancient memory. The gym, now silent, observed him as if he were a misplaced object, a scene error, an uncomfortable reminder that not everyone there was part of the same spectacle. The three young men moved even closer. The tallest, with arms like tree trunks and a crooked smile, stopped just inches from the old man. No more disguises. He wanted to be seen, wanted to provoke. The second, blonde and tattooed, spun a towel between his fingers like a rope ready to snap. The third laughed with his head thrown back, mocking something only he found funny. The old man didn't respond. He continued his workout, pulled the cable with the lightest weight but with a precision that suggested decades of practice. His arms trembled slightly. Sweat rolled down his forehead. But his expression was unshakable. There was no fear, only focus. The bullies couldn't stand it. One of them lightly kicked the machine as if to shoo away an insect. The impact was enough to make the cable shake. The old man paused, breathed deeply, began again. The dignity with which he reacted only increased the aggressor's contempt. They didn't want passive resistance, they wanted submission. They wanted to provoke a reaction that would authorize their humiliation. Around them, the atmosphere suffocated. People pretended to stretch while spying through mirrors. Headphones were discreetly lowered. Nervous smiles crept into the corners of mouths. No one laughed at the situation, but also, no one did anything. And that was the favorite fuel of the weak pretending to be strong. Collective silence. Jason remained standing like a shadow in slow motion. A few meters away, his eyes followed every action. He wasn't just an observer. He was a growing presence, a magnetic field about to pull the room's entire energy toward himself. The old man tried to switch machines, walked over to a free bench, sat down slowly, and began stretching his legs. But the three didn't allow it. They surrounded him, forming a semicircle, like predators. The tallest snapped his fingers in front of the old man's face. Another ran his hand along the iron bar, pretending to wipe it with disdain, and let it drop to the floor with a crash. The noise echoed like a muffled gunshot. Once again, the gym froze. The old man didn't retreat, but his shoulders stiffened. There was something in his eyes. It wasn't fear, it was weariness. The kind of tiredness that isn't cured with sleep. It was the weight of years being treated as invisible, as disposable, as someone who doesn't belong. The security guard at the entrance looked but didn't move. A trainer exchanged glances with the receptionist. She shrugged. Nothing had been broken. Yet. Jason took another step. The tension was now palpable, like the moment before a thunderclap. The blonde bully pulled the bench from under the old man with a childish and cruel gesture. The old man staggered but didn't fall, straightened himself, holding on to a nearby support. He still hadn't said a single word. His silence was his last armor, and that was exactly what the bullies wanted to destroy. They began to imitate him, reproduced his gestures with scorn, marched like toy soldiers, did exaggerated push-ups laughing. One of them grabbed the old man's water bottle, spun it in the air, and let it drop on purpose. The sound of the plastic hitting the floor was almost symbolic. Disdain stamped into every movement. The old man bent down, picked up the bottle, looked at it as if it were the last remnant of dignity he had left. Upon rising, he breathed deeply. His eyes were wet, but still firm. It was at that moment that Jason Statham calmly dropped the folded towel onto the bench where he was sitting. The sound of the cloth touching the leather rang out like a silent announcement. The people who had pretended not to see now looked, as if they knew something different was about to happen. A woman filming discreetly with her phone trembled in her hands. A trainer stepped forward, another stepped back. The tallest of the bullies noticed the movement, turned, saw Jason approaching, didn't recognize him, at least not yet. Jason walked calmly, as if merely changing machines. But each step was firm, heavy with intention. The old man lifted his gaze, saw Jason. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that look, the old man saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Jason said nothing. Didn't need to. The language of his steps, the tightness in his jaw, the restrained breathing, said more than any words. The bullies went back to mocking. Now with Jason nearby, they felt they had an audience. That's what they wanted. A new target, a new game. But they were playing the wrong game. Jason stopped just a few steps away. The air felt heavier. The sweat that used to be from training was now anticipation. Everyone in the gym, once silent accomplices, were now witnesses. The phones began to rise. Every eye was fixed on him. The old man paused his breathing, as if trying to save that moment. The bullies didn't understand what they were provoking, didn't recognize the silence of someone who's already seen war. Jason, motionless, waited. The tallest came too close, smiled, said something that echoed as provocation. Jason didn't react. The second bully snapped his fingers in Jason's face, mocking. The third laughed loudly, trying to shove his shoulder. The touch was quick, but enough. Jason didn't move, just stared at him. His eyes, once cold, became a silent threat. The gym held its breath. Time seemed to pause. And then, it was at that exact moment when the old man was shoved against a machine and no one moved, that Jason Statham rose from the bench, without haste, but with unshakable purpose. The shove had been discreet but violent, enough to make the old man's body hit the machine with a dry thud, muffled by the collective shock of the room. He didn't fall, but he stumbled. His knees weakened. His hand instinctively reached for support. The The sound of metal creaking echoed through the gym. A thin, sharp sound, as if the very structure of the place protested against what had just happened. For a second, time stopped. And then Jason Statham moved. It wasn't a theatrical movement. There was no rush, no fanfare, just silence being broken by the presence of something no one was prepared to witness. The pure manifestation of silent authority. Jason walked slowly, as if each step were a note in a tense musical score. His body showed no anger, his face carried no hatred, but his eyes didn't ask permission. They warned. The entire gym felt it. The bullies took a few seconds to notice. They kept laughing, certain the audience was on their side. But the smiles began to falter when they noticed the silence around them. When they realized the once complicit glances were now directed at someone else. Jason. The man standing in front of them, arms relaxed at his sides and shoulders at ease. But the energy around him was dense as lead. He didn't need to say anything. His silence spoke on behalf of everyone caught in that moment. The tallest of the three bullies looked him up and down. The arrogant expression tried to stay firm, but his eyes searched Jason's face for a reaction. They found nothing. No trace of fear. No hesitation. Just a fixed stare. And very, very calm, the bully let out a short laugh, pointed at Jason as if he were a walking joke, said something, probably a provocation. The other two laughed along, but now there was something forced in the laughter, something tense, something uncertain. Jason didn't respond, nor did he move. Around them, the machine stopped. People who had been training with dedication were now holding their phones with trembling hands. Some whispered names to each other. Others just pointed, eyes wide. Recognition began to spread like a spark in gunpowder. That's him. Jason Statham. He's really here. The words didn't need to be shouted. Whispering was enough. The blonde bully stepped forward, said something in a mocking tone, gesturing, tapped his chest with pride, like someone trying to measure strength with someone he didn't understand. Made a motion to shove Jason but hesitated. The hesitation said it all. Jason tilted his head slightly. Just that. An almost imperceptible gesture. But it made all three pause for a second. It was as if he were analyzing, weighing, deciding. The tension became unbearable. The gym felt on the verge of exploding. The old man, still regaining his balance, now stood upright, leaning on one of the machines, watching the scene intently. His eyes didn't show fear. They showed something deeper. Hope. Like someone watching a movie they never thought they'd see in real life. And then, the biggest bully came too close. Perhaps out of pride. Perhaps out of ignorance. He shoved Jason with both hands forcefully. The impact hit directly on the shoulder. A blow that would have made any other man take a step back. Jason didn't move. His body remained exactly in the same place. It was like pushing a wall. The bully's expression faltered. For the first time, something in his face cracked. A fracture in his confidence. The kind of crack that announces collapse. Jason still hadn't said a single word, but at that moment he didn't need to. He shoved Jason with both hands forcefully. The impact hit directly on the shoulder. A blow that would have made any other man take a step back. Jason didn't move. His body remained exactly in the same place. It was like pushing a wall. The bully's expression faltered. For the first time, something in his face cracked. A fracture in his confidence. The kind of crack that announces collapse. Jason still hadn't said a single word, but at that moment he didn't need to. The shove echoed inside the gym like a silent thunderclap. Everyone there knew what that gesture had caused. Not physically, but energetically. It was the line being crossed. The final spark. The point of no return. Jason took a deep breath, just once. And in the back of the gym, like a silent earthquake, the world began to change. All the phones were now pointed at him. Not a single treadmill was running. Not a single dumbbell was being lifted. Everything was suspended in time, waiting for the response. And Jason, simply stood there, upright, firm, as if he were part of the building's foundation. The bully took a step back, looked at his friends, seeking support or maybe borrowed courage. But the other two were also hesitant, laughing less, shuffling their feet nervously. The blonde muttered something, trying to save the moment, but it was already too late. Jason took the first step, and with that step, the entire gym held its breath. With that step, phones trembled in hands. With that step, the three bullies understood, even if too late, that they weren't dealing with another fragile target. It wasn't the old man. It wasn't just another customer. It wasn't just another ordinary face. It was Jason Statham. And he had decided to intervene. The biggest bully steps forward, stares Jason down, and with a cynical smile shoves him hard. The sound of impact is sharp. The room stops breathing. The shove echoed in the gym's memory like a caged thunder, an act of brute force thrown against the wall of silence. But for Jason Statham, it was merely the final mark of an already solved equation. The response came at the exact moment when the silence became unbearable. Jason moved, not with fury, not with haste, but with the precision of someone who understands what is necessary. No more, no less. The first movement was almost invisible. A shift in posture, a twist of the hips, a sudden shift in weight. And in the next second, the biggest bully was no longer standing. His body flew backward, crossing the space between the machines like a punching bag hurled by a hurricane. He crashed into the side of the pull-up bar, knocking over weight plates along the way. The sound was metallic, shrill, absolute. The gym floor trembled. The phones vibrated in the trembling hands of those filming. The other two bullies hesitated. There was no time to plan, only react. One of them lunged forward with arms raised, trying to grab Jason around the waist to take him down with sheer force. But Jason spun, dodging the reach with a clean move. He used the attacker's own momentum against him, grabbing him by the shirt and throwing him over a squat platform. The impact was harsh. Bone, metal, rubber. The blonde stepped back by instinct, but still tried to fight. He grabbed a dumbbell off the floor, eyes wide with adrenaline and fear. The improvised weapon trembled in his hand. Jason stared at him for a second. A single second, enough to freeze anyone's blood. And then, like a controlled lightning bolt, Jason advanced. He grabbed the attacker's wrist mid-motion, locking the arm as if time had stopped. A dry crack tore through the air. The dumbbell fell to the ground. The bully's hand opened. Pure pain shot across his face. Jason didn't stop. A sharp elbow strike to the stomach made him drop to his knees. All around, the gym seemed to be watching a live film. People who were motionless now held their breath as if trapped within the scene. No one spoke. No one intervened. It was like watching justice take physical form. The first bully tried to get up, but Jason was a step ahead. In one fluid motion, he advanced, grabbed the man's arm, and used his own body to unbalance him, hurling him over the bench press. The weights clattered down. The sound was deafening. The second tried to crawl. The blonde staggered, still breathless. Jason stopped at the center of the room. He breathed slowly, shoulders relaxed, hands loose. But his gaze, still sharp as a blade. He wasn't in fury. He was on a mission. A mission to show with absolute clarity that strength isn't volume, isn't noise, isn't arrogance. It's control. It's direction. It's choice. The biggest bully, panting, crawled to a fallen iron bar. He grabbed it like someone clutching a battle axe. His eyes searched for a way to reclaim what little dignity was left. Jason didn't move. He waited. The attack came with everything. The bar cut through the air like a blade. But Jason ducked, dodging with perfection. He grabbed the other end of the bar and twisted it, ripping it from the attacker's hands with ease. He turned with the momentum, and, with a sharp blow, swept the bully's legs out from under him, sending him crashing hard onto his back. The impact made the room tremble. The second bully was still trying to get up. Jason moved in with firmness. He crouched beside him, picked up a resistance band from the floor. In a quick move, he wrapped it around the man's arm and yanked it tight, immobilizing him. His body was pinned to the floor, unable to react. The third, now pale, tried to back away, but Jason was already in his path. No rush. Just certainty. The bully swung a desperate punch. Jason intercepted it mid-air, grabbing the wrist with one hand. He twisted the arm slightly, forcing the attacker to his knees. A forearm strike to the temple made him collapse. No screams, no drama, just the plain truth. He had lost. The gym remained in absolute silence. The three aggressors were on the floor, humiliated, taken down not by an impulsive attack but by a choreography of justice. Jason moved with the coldness of someone who knows pain and administers it with purpose. The old man remained standing, motionless, but his eyes were teary. The gym slowly began to breathe again, but Jason wasn't done yet. He walked slowly among the bodies, not to continue the fight, but to end it. He looked at each of the bullies with the same calm he'd shown from the beginning. Here was no revenge in his eyes, and there was correction, a reminder that not everyone bows before cowardice, and that sometimes the most feared strength is the one that arrives without needing to shout. But Jason wasn't done. With a simple gesture, he made them get up. And what came next, no one would ever forget. The gym floor now felt sacred, a territory where strength had manifested without noise, without hysteria, only truth. And that truth lay scattered among weight plates, resistance bands, and bodies that once flaunted power, but now begged for air. Jason stood firm, like a statue molded in purpose. His eyes moved across the defeated faces of the three aggressors. There was no fury in his expression, no satisfaction, but there was a silent demand, something that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. Get up. And one by one, they obeyed. With difficulty, stumbling, breathless, the once tense muscles were now trembling layers of shame. The once proud eyes avoided all contact, not with Jason, with their own reflection. Jason stepped back, creating space. The old man, who until then had remained in absolute silence, slowly walked toward the center of the room. His steps were slow, yet firm. The crowd parted as if he were a veteran in parade, and this was his field of honor. There were no cheers, only respect. The bullies couldn't face him. One stared at the ground. Another rubbed his still aching wrist. The third, sweaty, was still staggering. All of them knew what was coming next, and none of them were ready. Jason crossed his arms, gaze locked. It was as if his presence forced them to see what they had tried to ignore, the real weight of what they had done. The shame wasn't just physical, it was social. It was moral. The phones, now in every corner of the gym, kept recording. But people weren't there for entertainment. They were there because they had witnessed something transformative. An uncomfortable reminder that they had stayed silent for far too long. The blonde bully tried to mumble something, but no words came. The voice that once echoed through the room with mockery now trembled like that of an exposed child. Jason said nothing. He simply tilted his head slightly toward the old man. The gesture was clear. It wasn't him demanding apologies. It was the man they had ridiculed. It was with him that the reckoning had to happen. The old man stopped a few steps from the three. His eyes were steady. There was no hatred, only a dignity that refused to vanish, even after being dragged through the dirt. And then, the first bully spoke. Not with arrogance, not with cheap excuses, but with the trembling voice of someone who understood. Each word came out broken, an apology that sounded more like a shattered whisper. The second followed. Head down, hands crossed in front of his body, as if trying to hide his shame. The third took longer. Pale face, watery eyes. But in the end, he gave in too. None of them dared to lie. None tried to justify themselves, because what stood before them was something that couldn't be undone with words, only with acknowledgement. The old man simply nodded. He didn't need to say anything. The gym, stood still. The silence was no longer of omission. It was reverence. Their shame was now a mirror for everyone else who had remained silent. Those who looked away, those who pretended not to see, those who told themselves, "It's none of my business." Jason, still silent, looked around. And for a moment, every person in that room felt seen. The phones began to lower. The shoulders began to drop. The weight of reality had settled over everyone. But then something happened. The old man took a step forward, stopped in front of Jason. The two men looked at each other, and time seemed to slow again. The world for a moment shrank to fit within that shared silence. The veteran brought his hand to his chest, touched his shirt, right where the medals used to be. His eyes sparkled, not with fleeting emotion, but with remembrance. Jason watched him attentively, and there, in the middle of the gym, surrounded by mirrors, weights, and cold lights, the old man told his story. Not in words, but in gestures, in glances, in posture. Each scar exposed, each chapter of war and forgetfulness, every detail of a life that, upon returning from battle, had been left behind. He had been decorated, he had saved lives, he had faced dangers that the three aggressors, and nearly everyone there, could never begin to imagine. But upon returning, he had been treated like a burden, and even so, he remained kind. Jason lowered his head for a moment, in respect, not in defeat. The gym breathed deeply, and for the first time, someone applauded. It was timid, a quiet clap from the back, but soon others joined. It wasn't a celebration, it was recognition, a tribute, a collective attempt to correct, even for a moment, what had been ignored for so long. Jason looked around, but he didn't smile. He just observed, because this wasn't about him. It was about the man who, despite everything, had remained standing. The old man whispers something to Jason, and what he reveals makes Jason lower his head, a truth that changes everything. Jason remained silent after hearing what the old man had whispered. His expression, once unshakable, now carried a trace of something rare, a silent weight that only reveals itself when the truth is undeniable. The veteran had shared something intimate, not with everyone, only with him. A memory, a pain, a truth no camera could ever capture. Jason lowered his eyes for a moment, honoring that man's past. There wasn't an audience big enough in the world to justify a false gesture there. Not in that place, not in front of someone who, even forgotten, had never stopped standing tall. He placed one hand on the veteran's shoulder, firm but not forceful, as if returning something that had once been stolen. Respect. The gym remained still, as if waiting for the end of a sacred ceremony. The trio of bullies still stood nearby, quiet, now reduced to shadows of what they had been minutes before. The crowd no longer wished to record with their phones. Now, they just wanted to remember. Jason turned and walked toward the exit. His steps, as firm as they were in the beginning, now sounded different, as if each stride carried the weight of the lesson left behind. The crowd parted. No shoves, no noise, just silence. The old man stayed where he was, eyes fixed on the door opening ahead of Jason. And then, Jason stopped. He turned one last time. His gaze swept the gym like a final verdict, not one of condemnation, but of responsibility, a reminder that everyone there saw it. Everyone. What they would do with it was no longer up to him. Jason took the final step, and the doors closed behind him with a mechanical hiss. But what he left inside would never fade. The old man looked around, and for the first time, no one looked away from him. Some greeted him with a timid nod. Others approached. They offered towels, water bottles, apologies. There were no speeches, only gestures, the kind of silent remorse that slowly tries to rebuild what had been neglected. The next morning, the gym's front looked different. A sign had been posted right at the entrance, framed beneath the modern logo of the fitness chain. Respect those who carry scars you will never see. No one knew who had placed it there, but no one dared take it down. The old man was never seen at that location again. But there were rumors that days later, a veterans association had helped him find a proper shelter, with support, care, and humanity. Jason didn't return either. There was no need. The mark he had left was deeper than any workout, more lasting than any set of repetitions. He wasn't seeking glory. He wasn't seeking recognition. Jason Statham had done what needed to be done. No show, no cameras, no likes. Just justice. A silent justice that speaks louder than any speech. The gym returned to its routine. But nothing was the same. People watched more, listened more. And when someone new walked in, someone different, someone who might once have been ridiculed, space was given. Respect came before judgment, as if everyone were trying in their own way to continue the story they had lived there. The bullies, they never showed up again, but their names weren't forgotten. Not for revenge, but as a warning that what happened there could happen anywhere. Because true strength doesn't make noise. It acts and disappears. But the echo remains. Inside, life goes on. But something has been planted. Outside, among the passing cars, a man in black calmly crosses the street, his face looking straight ahead, his step relaxed, hands in his pockets. Jason. He turns the corner and disappears from view. But the feeling that he's still nearby remains. True strength isn't measured by how much weight someone can lift, but by how much they carry in silence, by what they choose to protect, by what they refuse to let continue. The old man was mocked for carrying scars. Jason saw them and acted. And on that day, everyone learned that there are silences that scream, and that there are men who don't need to raise their voices to change the world. If this moment moved you, if it reminded you of what true strength really means, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still believes in silent justice. Because stories like this need to be remembered. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any more stories like this. Comment where you're watching from. We'll see you next time.